My son called and said, "We changed the locks. You don't live here anymore." I calmly replied, "That's very bold of you." And 2 days later he received an urgent letter from a lawyer and froze. But what happened next shocked him even more, because Martha's funeral was difficult. We weren't close friends, more like neighbors who chatted at the grocery store or walked together to the pharmacy. But when you're over 70, each farewell feels like a punch to the chest. This year it was already the third funeral, and summer had just begun. I was slowly walking back home, leaning on my cane. After falling in winter, my knee never fully recovered. The doctor said, "At your age, it takes time." But I refused to listen to that. I still had strength, I had plans. I wasn't going to give up just because I was 73. Maple Street welcomed me with silence. 38 years living in this house, in the same place. Everything was familiar down to the smallest detail. How the shadow falls from the fence at 4 p.m., how the right step on the porch creaks. Small, neat houses, tidy front yards, flowering trees, an old, quiet and in its own way, cozy neighborhood. Almost my entire life had passed here. But in recent months, my son David had started talking more and more about how I needed to move somewhere closer to people. "Mom, you understand, it's hard to live alone in a house like this. The stove, water, stairs. What if something happens?" "I have only 5 steps on my porch," I would calmly respond. And he would repeat, "Jennifer and I found an excellent retirement home, Sunset Valley. View of the park, good food, medical supervision. I've been there. It's nice clean." But all that wasn't for me. It smelled of medications. Everything revolved around schedules and silence. It was too early for me. I climbed the steps and took out my keys. I inserted them into the lock. They wouldn't go in. I turned, click, and nothing. It wouldn't open. I tried again, then another key, then the entire keychain, but nothing worked. And then it dawned on me. The locks had been changed. I stood there, leaning on my cane, feeling everything go cold inside me. It wasn't a mistake or a coincidence. They had done it on purpose. I took out my phone, one of the few modern inventions I had resigned myself to living with. David had insisted, "Mom, take a smartphone in case something happens." I dialed his number. It started ringing. On the third ring, he picked up. "Mom, are you home already?" "I would be if I could get in. The keys don't work." There was silence. Even through the silence I could hear him searching for words. "We changed the locks. I wanted to tell you. Jennifer and I thought it was the best decision. You said it was hard for you to walk, but my house has only 1 floor." "My house is also 1 story, David. There are only 5 steps on the porch." "Mom, yesterday you left the stove on." I stepped away for just a minute because the phone rang. I would have come back. Jennifer came in as usual without knocking and saw everything. Silence. "We've prepared a room for you at our place. Later in Sunset Valley. I've already spoken with them." A room with a balcony just became available. I remained quiet, and then very calmly asked, "So now I don't live here anymore?" "Mom, don't say it like that. We care about you. You often forget to take your pills. You leave the water running." "Very thoughtful," I interrupted. "While I was at the funeral, you changed the locks and started packing my things. Jennifer is only collecting what's necessary." "Mom, I can come pick you up. Or Jennifer can come." "Not necessary. I'll find somewhere to spend the night. And tomorrow, we'll talk with the documents on the table." "Mom, you don't understand." I ended the call. Deep breath. No neighbors around. Thank God they hadn't humiliated me in front of strangers. Although, to be honest, it wasn't a shock. Things had been moving in this direction for a long time. David mentioned the retirement home more and more often. Jennifer would come in without warning, check if I was taking my pills, if I hadn't forgotten to turn off the light. And my grandchildren Michael and Emma ask more and more frequently, "What will happen to the house, Grandma, when you're gone?" I'm not stupid. I saw how Jennifer eyed Grandma's china, how David automatically assessed the value of the furniture. I heard how Michael talked on the phone. Grandma's house is prime real estate. The neighborhood is only getting more valuable. I took out my phone and dialed another number. Hello? Sarah, this is Helen Wilson. Remember me? Math teacher at your high school. Of course I remember you. You made me solve problems on Sundays. And now you're a lawyer, and I possibly need your help. As soon as possible. 20 minutes later, a taxi arrived. I looked at the house, at those windows, the porch, the flower bed, with lilies. It stood there as always, quiet, silent, mine, but now closed to me. But this wasn't the end. It was the beginning. If my son thought I was no longer able to stand up for myself, he was sorely mistaken. I, Helen Wilson, taught mathematics for 35 years. And if there's a system in life, I'll find it. And if someone has started playing against me, they still don't know who they're dealing with. The taxi driver took me to a business center downtown Boston, a large glass building with security, elevators, and a marble floor in the lobby. Sarah Matthews' office was on the 8th floor. On the door a neat plaque, Matthews and Associates, and inside a spacious office, nothing superfluous, just a desk, shelves with documents, and a couple of paintings with neutral landscapes, restrained but cozy. Sarah greeted me warmly. She was already nearly 40, a neat, short haircut, confident movements, calm voice. But I still saw before me that pigtailed girl who, in 9th grade, solved the most difficult problems faster than anyone in the school. Helen, she shook her head while closing the notebook where she had been recording my story. What your son did is not just indecent, it's illegal. He essentially seized your property while you weren't home. I don't want to sue David, I said tiredly. He's my son. Then, Sarah nodded, we'll find another way. But first, let's check the documents. In whose name is the house officially registered? I took out the folder I had been keeping for more than half a year. Since I noticed that David was too interested in my accounts, I started collecting everything in a separate folder: the purchase agreement, mortgage payments, bank documents, even will. Sarah flipped through everything in silence. The house is entirely yours. The mortgage is paid off. No encumbrances. You are the sole owner. He has no right to dispose of even a square foot of it. Good, I nodded. And now the letter. I want him to understand how serious all this is. We'll do that. But where will you stay these next few days? I'll rent something or a hotel. Don't even think about it. Sarah shook her head decisively. I have a spare room. Stay at my place as long as necessary. And don't argue. It's the least I can do for you. I wanted to object, but she stopped me with a gesture. You were the first adult who believed in me. You told me that even a plumber's daughter could become a lawyer. And thanks to you, I didn't give up. So now it's my turn to help. And I gave in. That evening we went to her home. A cozy, bright apartment with panoramic windows. On the shelves, law books and childhood graduation photos. In the guest room, a carefully made bed, a warm blanket, a vase with daisies. It moved me. I placed on the nightstand, the only personal item I had taken from home, a photo in a silver frame. My late husband Robert and I were standing in front of the house, having just received the keys. Laughing, young, disheveled, happy. I sat on the bed, looking at the photo. So many years had passed. When Robert got sick, David was only 8 years old. I was left alone. I worked at the school, took extra jobs, ran clubs, carried the mortgage, paid for extracurricular activities, tutors. At night, I graded papers and then cried in the bathroom so no one would hear. But we made it. I gave everything for him. David went to college, became a financial advisor, started a family. I was proud of him, and now he was throwing me out of my own house without warning, without shame. The next morning, Sarah and I went to the bank. I requested statements for all my accounts for the past 5 years. The manager politely printed the documents. I also gave instructions to remove David as an authorized person. He no longer had the right to touch my money. Then another bank. That's where I kept my safe deposit box. In it, the original documents, wills, and a voice recorder. An ordinary one, the size of a pack of cigarettes. For 3 years I had been recording everything related to conversations with my son and his family, not out of vengeance, but caution. I felt something was coming. I took everything important. Everything else was just stuff. Back at the office, Sarah spread the papers on the desk. This is a serious case. Accounts, documents, statements, audio recordings. We have a strong position. I don't want to ruin his life, I said quietly. But you have the right to protect yours, she responded calmly. And we wrote the letter. Calm, legally precise, but merciless in essence. It contained everything: the illegal changing of locks, the attempted forced eviction, the use of power of attorney to withdraw funds. At the end, a demand to return access to the house, immediately. I asked to add a point about emotional distress. Let them know this isn't just a quarrel. It's serious. The letter was sent not only to his home address, but also to his work. Let his colleagues read what a caring son works with them. In the evening, Sarah and I raised glasses of wine. To justice, she said. To life lessons, I replied. The next morning Sarah went to work, and I stayed alone in her apartment, with a cup of tea by the window. Below, the park. Children playing, young mothers chatting on benches, elderly people walking slowly with canes. Everything following its course. Everyone has a normal life. And I'm in a whirlwind. Yesterday, I still had a house, silence, order, and today, a battle. But strangely enough, I didn't feel helpless. On the contrary, something long forgotten appeared inside me. Determination, strength, calm, but not submission. Once I was just like that. Persistent, cold in calculations, calm in chaos. That's how I raised David alone, after Robert's death. And if now I need to gather my will in a fist, I'll do it. I'm not an old lady who can be pushed into a retirement home. Meanwhile, the letter arrived. As planned, a courier delivered the letter to David's office, with a signature, and the second one directly to his home. I imagined how he was reading the lines: illegal eviction, fraudulent withdrawal of funds, possible criminal case. I imagined how he was turning pale, how his face twisted. Sarah called in the evening. The secretary said he took a day off, said it was family circumstances. That means he had already read the letter. Let him think, I said. I have everything I need, and everything else is unimportant. We can call the police. Formally, he broke into the house without permission. He's probably there now, rummaging through the drawers. I shook my head. No need. After all, he's my son. Give him a chance to understand what he's done. 2 days passed, and on the third, the phone rang. David's number. I didn't answer, and then a second call, and again, silence. Then an SMS. Mom, let's talk. Not on the phone, in person. Sarah and I chose the place. My favorite cafe, Southern Breeze. Small and cozy. That's where I used to celebrate the end of the school year, with colleagues. I would take David there for pastries when he was a child. Now this place had become an arena. My thoughts returned to it, as Sarah and I walked to the cafe. She confident in a light suit. Me with a new cane and a straight back. Inside, at the far table, David was already sitting, nervously turning a cup of coffee. I must admit, he didn't look his best. Wrinkled shirt, bags under his eyes, stubble. We approached. He stood up. Mom. He reached out to hug me. I stepped to the side. Better without theatrics. Let's sit down. I took out the recorder from my purse and placed it on the table. What's that? He tensed. A recording. Our conversation will be recorded if you don't mind. I want everything you say to be said honestly. Mom, we're family. He smiled forcedly. Exactly, and in a family you don't act like this. The waitress brought napkins and tea. We placed our order: water for Sarah, coffee for David, tea for me, and then silence. Mom, I understand how this looks, but I didn't mean any harm. I, he stammered. You changed the locks on my house while I was at a funeral, I said calmly. That's not care, that's betrayal. He lowered his eyes. I was going to explain everything, really. And the $80,000 you withdrew from my account last year, were you going to explain that too? He raised his eyes. How do you know? I pulled out the statement. I'm a math teacher, David. I know how to count. You've been withdrawing small amounts for 5 years, thinking I wouldn't notice, and I simply waited for you to come and say, Mom, help me. But you never came. You just, it's not stealing. I wanted to pay it back. Wanted to, but didn't. He stared at the table. Not a word. Only his face went pale. I continued. You wanted to sell my house. Move me to a retirement home. Spend the rest on your debts. Mom, I owe $200,000. I invested in a project, crypto, unsuccessfully. I didn't want to take money from clients. I flinched. Clients? He froze. Realized he had let something slip. It was temporary. I wanted to return everything before the audit, with interest. Sarah intervened for the first time. Do you understand that this is a criminal offense? He lowered his head. I understand. Then listen, I said. We've put together a plan, not to punish you but to give you a way out. Sarah took out the documents. Everything was clear. Sell the share in the firm, sell the car, cut expenses. This would cover the debt. He looked at the papers as if he was seeing Chinese characters. You're suggesting I sell everything I've built for 15 years? No, I replied. We're suggesting you don't go to jail. He exhaled deeply. I need to think. You have 3 days, said Sarah. And one more thing, I added. Return the keys, now. Silently, he took out a bunch and put it on the table. I took it but didn't put it away. I leaned toward him. Remember, this house is not an inheritance from your father. It's my house, bought with money from selling my parents' apartment. Paid for by me. I worked nights, paid the mortgage, taught you, fed you, clothed you, and I won't allow you to treat me like a bird. He was silent for a long time, and then quietly, I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't understand. I didn't understand anything. I put my hand on his. Not for me. For yourself. Forgive and fix. He nodded, then stood up and left. The keys remained on the table. Sarah and I sat a bit longer at the table after David left. She finished her water. I drank my tea, already cold, but somehow warm. Inside me, there was no triumph, only tiredness, but also calm. He didn't shout, didn't lie, didn't threaten. He listened. It was the first time in a long while. You are strong, Sarah said quietly. I just told the truth, I shrugged. Sometimes the truth needs to be spoken aloud. Otherwise everyone pretends it doesn't exist. We walked home. The day was clear, smelled of linden. It was almost summer. I don't remember feeling so free in recent years. The next day, Sarah and I went to my house. I borrowed her set of keys. We changed the old lock for a new one, just in case. I stood on the porch like a guest, but now I had access. I inserted the key, click, and the door opened. The first thing I felt was a strange feeling of emptiness. The house seemed a bit different. Apparently, everything was in its place. The cabinet, the clock, the armchair, but you could tell someone had been rummaging. Drawers not fully closed, stacks of books askew. The living room rug shifted. Yes, David was looking for documents. Maybe recordings, maybe something else. He didn't find it. I walked through the rooms, slowly, stopping at shelves, straightening books, adjusting curtains. In the bedroom, I opened the little box. Robert's wedding ring was in place. It means not everything in David had died. Something remained. During the entire first week, I put the house in order, threw out old newspapers, rearranged books, cleaned floors, as if washing away foreign touches. It was like a return, as if I was becoming the owner again. And all this time, silence. No calls, no messages. On the 8th day, the doorbell rang. I open it. On the threshold, Michael, my grandson, embarrassed with a bouquet of wildflowers. "Hi, Grandma. Can I come in?" I nodded silently and stepped aside. We sat in the kitchen. I put the flowers in a vase, set the kettle. He was silent, turning a napkin in his hands. "How are you?" he asked when we sat down. "I'm fine. And you?" "Not so good. At home, everything's not great. Parents are arguing. Emma hardly sleeps at home, stays with a friend. And he fell silent. "You want to say something, Michael?" "I want to. I I miss those times when we were a normal family. When on Sundays we would come to you, you'd bake a pie, Dad would joke, Mom would smile. Everything was real." I felt something clench inside me. It's true, not everything was destroyed in one day. It had been happening for years. Gradually. Earlier, I would bake David's favorite pie every week. We would all gather, then they started coming less frequently. Then only on holidays. Then they wouldn't even call without a reason. "You know, Michael," I said quietly. "Sometimes the past can't be brought back, but you can build something new if you want to." He nodded. "Can we start coming on Sundays again? Just to have lunch together?" "We can. Let's start this Sunday." "Yes," he nodded. "I'll come and try to convince Emma. And the parents? Invite them. If they come, good. If they don't come, it means it's not time yet." Everyone has their own path. On Sunday, I got up early. I baked that same apple pie with a crispy crust and cinnamon, like in David's childhood. I roasted a chicken with herbs, made mashed potatoes, salad, set the table like before. At 2 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Michael came first, helped set up the chairs, brought a bottle of wine. Then Emma, unexpectedly serious, with a box of pastries. I was about to say something when the third bell rang. On the threshold, David and Jennifer both silent, keeping a bit apart from each other. But they came, and that was the main thing. The meal began awkwardly, short phrases, eyes on plates, but food does its job. The pie smelled warm. They praised the chicken. Emma talked about her internship, Michael about a project at work. Even Jennifer smiled when I complimented her hairstyle. And only David sat in silence. After the pie, the grandchildren went to the living room to put on a movie. Jennifer was helping me with the dishes, and David was standing in the corner of the kitchen. I approached him myself. "How are you?" He shrugged. "Sold my share, paid off most of the debt. Looking for work. It's hard, but I'm living." "You'll manage," I said. He smiled ironically. "A financial advisor who drowned in debt. Who will hire me?" "I have an idea," I said. "Remember Reynolds, the economist we worked with at school?" He nodded. "He now runs a financial literacy center, looking for a teacher." I talked to him. "He's willing to meet with you." He looked at me as if he couldn't believe it. "You recommended me. You're my son, David. And you made a big mistake. But that doesn't mean you can't try to start over." He nodded, and for the first time in a long time, genuinely, with gratitude. "Thank you, Mom." I put my hand on his shoulder. Only now, honestly, for real. 2 months have passed since that Sunday lunch. Since then, we've gathered every week. Sometimes only Michael and Emma came, sometimes David with Jennifer too. It wasn't always easy. We didn't pretend nothing had happened, but gradually learned to listen to each other again. David finally got a job at the Financial Literacy Center. The salary was less than he was used to, and there were no bonuses, no business trips, no restaurants. He taught classes for retirees, for young families, for students. At first it was difficult, awkward, but then he got into it. He even once told me, "Mom, you know, when you explain how not to handle money, it somehow makes a much bigger impression than advice from a textbook." I just nodded. He was starting to mature at 48 years old. He and Jennifer eventually divorced without scandals. Quietly, apparently, there was nothing left to save. Too many resentments had accumulated. She moved to her parents in Chicago. We didn't discuss her. I knew it was their decision. I shouldn't interfere. And the grandchildren, they changed surprisingly. Michael began to take more interest in family history. He asked about my parents, how I met Robert, how we lived in the 80s on one salary, even asked to see old photographs. And Emma. Emma enrolled in evening law courses. Once she confessed that after talking with Sarah Matthews, something clicked inside her. I understood, she told me. I want to be like her. Smart, calm, strong, and fair. Then you'll succeed, I said. Just don't be afraid to say no, even if it's family. Especially if it's family. David started calling more often. Just like that, without a reason. Asked how I was feeling, about the gardens. Sometimes brought groceries, or came by to help with something around the house. But the main thing is, the rush disappeared from him. He no longer said phrases like, I have a meeting, I'll call you back later. Not now, Mom. He listened for real. Once I saw him standing by the living room window, looking at our garden. You know, Mom, he said quietly, I always thought this house was Dad's, that he built it, that he was the main one, and you were just beside him, and now I understand it was you. You built, you endured, you held us all together. I didn't answer anything, just hugged him. Already an adult, gray-haired, with wrinkled fingers and tired eyes. But at that moment again, my boy. Time passed. Autumn crept up imperceptibly, leaves were falling, the air was getting colder, and one evening over tea, I said, I'm leaving. Where? Michael looked up. To Europe. For 3 months. Everyone froze. Mom, are you serious? David looked at me as if seeing me for the first time. Quite. To England, to see the British Museum. To Paris, to the embankments, to Italy, to Rome, through the streets, to Greece, just to sit by the sea. I've been saving a little, all these years, quietly in a separate account. And now it's time. You were saving for this? David lowered his eyes. I didn't know. You didn't need to know, I said softly. Some things a woman should do for herself. They saw me off to the airport, the whole family, cried, hugged. Even Jennifer sent a message. Happy journey, and thank you for everything. On the plane, I looked out the window and thought, family isn't about holidays and photos in frames. It's about respect, about honesty, about not having the right to take away another person's voice. Their home, their right to decide. I didn't fight for power, I fought for the right to be heard, and I was heard. I had never traveled beyond the neighboring state before, not even in my youth, whether for lack of time, money, or because it seemed not for me. But now, standing on the platform of London's train station, with a suitcase and cane in hand, I suddenly understood. All this is mine, and the museum, and the bridges, and the smell of coffee in a foreign language. I had just postponed it all my life. I visited the British Museum, stood for a long time in front of a display with ancient artifacts. I looked and thought, here you are, Helen Wilson, all your life solving other people's problems, correcting other people's mistakes. And now it's your turn. In Paris, I sat on the banks of the Seine and drank coffee, watching tourists run around with maps, and for the first time, I wasn't in a hurry. In Italy, I walked the streets, ate pasta with mushrooms, and was silent. Just listened to myself, without anxiety, without obligations. In Greece, I simply lay on the beach with the sound of waves, and wrote in a notebook the names of cities I still wanted to reach. Every Sunday, I called home. Michael told how they were preparing borscht according to my recipe. Emma asked for advice on texts for her coursework. David asked where I was now, and how I got there. Even Jennifer sent a postcard. You turned out to be stronger than all of us combined. I'm sorry I didn't understand that earlier. And I believed every word, because something really had changed. Not on the outside, on the inside. No one perceived me as weak, convenient, silent anymore. I reclaimed my voice, and no one could speak for me again. When I returned, they were waiting for me at the airport with flowers, with welcome home signs, with hugs, and surprisingly, with a new renovation. Surprise, said Michael. We renovated the bathroom. Everyone chipped in. You've been saying for years that you wanted to change the tiles, added Emma, but you kept putting it off. I entered and cried. Not because of the tiles, but because they had heard me. Now I have a new globe in my bedroom, and next to it, a notebook where I write down the countries I'll go to next. And on my nightstand, a photograph, me, all wrapped up in a scarf, with the Eiffel Tower in the background, and an inscription made by hand. It's never too late. Never too late. Just stop waiting for someone's permission. The past wasn't forgotten. And there's no need. It's part of me, but now it doesn't control me. I'm not just a mother, not just a grandmother, not just a teacher. I'm a woman who has the right to dream. Even in my 70s, especially in my 70s, after returning, I felt different. Not younger, no, simply more whole, as if I had collected all the parts of myself that over the years I had given away to students, to my son, to my husband, to my grandchildren. Now they were with me, and I was no less than all my roles. The house became a home again. Not just a dwelling, but precisely my space. I woke up not to an alarm, but to how the sun passed along the wall. I baked pies, read, listened to silence. I returned to interests in things that were previously, as if on pause, knitting, a diary, sending favorite books to Michael and Emma. Even visitors appeared, not for holidays, out of obligation, but for real. Neighbor Betty came to chat over tea. Former colleague Nancy called, "You're back, let's meet." Once even an older student came. Sarah gave her my number. A girl from distant 2001, now an adult woman, mother of 3. "You once told me I was smart. It was the first time in my life I believed it," she said, and I felt warm inside. And the family continued to change, as if an old film had been removed, and they finally started looking at each other without filters. Jennifer called herself, from Chicago. I did a lot of things wrong then. I was afraid your house would be forever and I would always be a stranger in it. You could have just talked, I responded calmly. I could have, but I didn't know how. Thank you for admitting it, was all I said. And truly it was no longer about grievances, it was clarity. David invited me to his classes. He was giving a lecture on personal finance for retirees, and wanted me to just come and listen. I went, sat in the front row. He spoke confidently, without papers, and then suddenly said, "Everything I know, I learned from my mother. She's not an economist, but she taught me to live and not give up." I almost cried, just nodded. At the end, a woman with a scarf on her head approached us. "Is this your mother?" she asked. "Thank you both. Today you turned my life around." Sunday dinners became constant, without frills. A simple table, food with soul, conversations without masks. One day, Emma brought an application. "I'm applying for a master's degree in law. Sarah Matthews has promised to be my academic advisor." Michael started talking about wanting to take out a mortgage, but only when he was sure he could handle it all. He came for advice, asked, consulted. Now I saw they hadn't just grown up, they had become conscious. And one evening, I was sitting on the porch wrapped in a blanket, with a cup of tea. I was watching how the sunset fell on the old maple tree by the gate, and David quietly came out to me. "Mom, I did a lot of things wrong and lost a lot. And you kept something," I said. "You kept yourself and the chance to rebuild everything anew." He sat down beside me. We were silent. And then he suddenly said, "I'm glad you couldn't open the door then." I turned. He looked toward the street. "Because if you had just walked in then, I would have continued to think you were weaker than you are." "And so you understood," I specified. "I understood," he nodded, "that I have a strong mother, and that home isn't walls, it's respect and a place where no one will throw you out." I smiled and suddenly felt calm. Not because everything was ideal, but because everything had become authentic. Half a year passed. Someone would say, "Not much." But for me, it was like a new chapter written in different handwriting. Without erasing the past. Without lies. Simply honestly. From the point where I once understood, you can no longer stay silent. The house was living again. Not just standing there, but living. Voices resounded. Doors slammed. It smelled of fresh baking. On Sundays, the family gathered. Someone brought salad. Someone jokes. Someone fatigue. But everyone came by their own will, not out of obligation. I didn't remind them of debts, of grievances, of locks. And not because I had forgotten, but because I had forgiven. And that's completely different. One day, Emma, returning from university, brought me a small black box. Michael and I pooled our money. Just a gift. Just because we have you. Inside was a pendant, small, in the shape of a door. On the back, an engraving. "You are the one who keeps home even when they don't let you in." I held the pendant in my palm for a long time, and then put it around my neck and wear it to this day. In December, I went to apply for a visa again. This time to Japan, because I dreamed of seeing the maples in Kyoto. Because I can. Because I don't have to ask why I need this at my age. You know what I've understood during this time. Old age is not a shadow, not waiting for the end. It's the time when you can finally start living not for someone, but in accord with yourself. When you can allow yourself to rest, travel, say no, put locks, change locks, open only to those who know how to enter humanely. Once, on the street, a neighbor called out to me, "Helen, you look younger somehow." "I've simply returned," I replied. "From where?" "From that part of myself that I once left for everyone else. Now I'm with myself again." On my nightstand, I have a notebook. In it, a list of cities. I no longer perceive the word retirement as an ending. It's simply a pause between journeys, and the word grandmother is not a reason to sit with grandchildren. If you want walk alone through Istanbul or Florence, life doesn't end while you live. And no sun, no lock, no letter can cancel you out. And if someone thinks you've lived your life already, open the door. Only not for them, but for yourself. Thank you for being with me until the end of this story.